Now that we have defined what authentication is, we can discuss about the attack scenarios in the context of authentication. There are three possible attack scenarios: attack at client side, attack in communication channel, attack at server side. We have already discussed about possible security issues in communication channel, so we won't be covering this in this authentication lecture series. Rather, we will focus on attack at client side and attack at server side. Previously, we have defined what client side is. We have defined what server side is. Obviously, attack at client side would happen at the client side software when the attacker is trying to guess your password, or he could be using some kind of malicious software. And at the attack at server side could happen when somebody has access to the password file at the server side. And in the upcoming slides, we will discuss in detail about those attacks at client side and server side, and we will discuss about what are the possible ways to prevent against those attacks. Attack at client side could happen when the attacker trying to guess your password. Or he could also install the keylogger into your local PC or a malware, such that those keylogger or malware could listen to the password that is entered by you, or a malware that could also even modify your password. Unfortunately, topics on keylogger and malware are out of the scope. We will only be discussing about guessing passwords. Obviously, passwords can be guessed, especially if you are using very easy to guess password like same as user ID, or derive your password from your own username, birthday, or phone number. I wonder at this point, how many of you are using your own username, birthday, phone number as your password right now? Or password could also be taken from a common word list or the patterns. You will be surprised to see that these are the most commonly used passwords in the world, according to this study, most common password. And you wouldn't be the first one to think that if you take a random word out from a college dictionary, it might be a secure password, but unfortunately that is not, because a dictionary roughly contains about 80,000 words. And if the attacker used some kind of a hacking software to guess the dictionary words, it would only take about 80 seconds if you are taking a generous estimate of 1 guess per millisecond. Or the attacker could also brute force of possible alphabetic characters exhaustively. Still, it wouldn't be hard to take, it wouldn't take too much time to be able to brute force all such alphabetic characters. And the reason why we often use easy to remember password or the same password again and again is mainly simply because it is hard to remember different password across different applications. And for that, there is a solution called single sign-on, which this topic will be covered in a separate lecture. The study have shown that 80% of a sample set of 3289 passwords can be uncovered in about 168 hours. If you're interested in more details about all these, you can refer to the reference list that I put here. Attack at server side. We discussed that there are two types of authentication: weak authentication and strong authentication. In these slides, we will discuss about the attack at server side when weak authentication is used. If you recall, in using weak authentication, the user, Bob, is revealing password S to Alice. The question here to address is, in the registration phase, how is the password being stored? And during the authentication, how is password being verified? And in the weak authentication, exploiting this weak scenario would become attack at server side. Let us look at an insecure solution when using weak authentication scheme. Assume Alice stores Bob ID and password in a password file like this. The insecure solution of storing such a password is by simply storing them as it is in the plain text format. Let me write here. Alice stores password in plain text format. So in this case, what will happen if somebody has access to this password file? Then obviously that somebody could easily take the password because it is in plain text format. And such an attack is considered as attack at server side. To prevent this, one way to prevent this is instead of storing the password in the plain text format, Alice, the server, could store the password in a hash format. And you know what is the property of hash? When you're hashing an information, that information becomes irreversible. It cannot be reversed. That means even if somebody has access to that password file, since the password is not in the plain text format, and hash is one of the hash property is cannot be reversed, one-way property. So the attacker could not use that hash information to log in as impersonating as Bob. So as such, storing the password information in the password file in a hash format is considered more secure. So this is some realistic example taken from this book. So when the server side store the password, often they store in the hash format as shown here, but additionally they have to add an extra value in front or behind the password. That value is often referred to as a sort value. This is because in the case that the password that you use are the same as the other users, it is often very likely that you and the other user, for example, Pat here and Ross here, Pat here and Ross here, you can see that they are both using the same password. So if that is the case, what will happen if you hash? One of the hash property is that if you are using the same input, the hash value is always the same. That means if you are using the same password, then the hash value will be the same for two different users. So in the case that the attacker has access to the password file, and in the case that he is also one of the users there, and if he spots the same hash value and his password value, then he can easily know that the other user is also using the same password. Or he can try to use different password values and then trying to guess the password. So to prevent such from happening, in practice, what does the server typically do is that to add this additional information called sort in front of the password, and ideally this information should be unique across different users. And such unique information could be obtained by means of identity. Because even though identity are not private, they are not secret information, identity are typically unique within the same organization, within the same system, right? Identity are unique. So in that case, different user would have different unique value. And when you add this value in front of the password, then the outcome, the hash value, should be different across different users. So in that case, we call this kind of system as more secure. And that is what is typically used in practice nowadays. So in the next lecture, we will discuss more about password attacks. Okay, how can, what are the, apart from the Gaussian passwords, what are the other methods that can be used to steal the passwords? So see you then next time.